At the edge of an international border, at the edge of the Pacific, at the edge of innovation, community, education, and discovery, you're listening to At the Edge of It All, a University of San Diego podcast where USD experts speak on topics and stories that impact you and the broader community. With us today is Lily Vistica. She is a professor of practice for the Marital and Family Therapy and Clinical Training Director at the School of Leadership and Education Sciences at the University of San Diego. Lily, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So you wear many different hats. You're a professor here at the university. You're also a therapist, director of clinical training, and you also are a Red Cross volunteer. So we'll dive into all of those projects that you have going on. But what drew you, first of all, into the world of mental health? Because that is sort of the overarching umbrella of all these different areas, right?
Yeah, so I started in undergrad as a special education major, and then I actually had a faculty member say, I think you would really like human services. He ended up becoming my advisor and getting me through undergrad, and I switched majors after doing an internship in a hospital in Hartford, Connecticut. Working with kids that were hospitalized, I realized I cared more about helping folks outside of the classroom and being able to help in that mental health space. And that really, changed the trajectory of my field and career. And then I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and I really saw how much families need support when one family member has mental health. And that's really drew me into marital and family therapy.
And what does the clinical training process work? Are you helping nurses get into this field too? Because I know there is just such a big need for kind of the work that you do, right?
Yeah, so my director of clinical training is more about when our students already are in our program, they need to get practice being a first-time counselor, a first-time therapist. So I work with our community partners here in San Diego to place them in practicum sites so that it's their first time being a therapist, but they're under a lot of supervision. So we have students working out in the community here in San Diego in hospitals, outpatient settings, nonprofits. And so this is a way for our students to get practice while they're still here at USD on how to be a counselor or therapist.
Wonderful. And then right now you also serve as the lead of the disaster mental health team for the Red Cross. What does that work entail, and how long have you been doing that?
I started in January 2021. I actually was recruited to the Red Cross because of my job here at USD. So at the time, the program manager reached out about, is there a way to have our students, our graduate students, volunteer with the Red Cross? And as she was telling me about the work that they do, I shared that I'm also a licensed therapist, and I had worked in crisis intervention and some of the work I had done. She told me about what they were doing, and I had no idea that the Red Cross provided mental health support right after people experienced disasters. And I also didn't realize how much we have so many home fires and how, small disasters here locally are happening constantly, and that the Red Cross provides mental health. So she actually recruited me for a few years. It took me a little while, and then I said yes. And I loved it. So I have had great training and mentorship. People on my team went to 9/11. I have folks that, led the mass casualty in Las Vegas. So, I've been really well trained on how to do this by folks that have been really inspiring to me. We provide support to San Diego County and Imperial County. Some of that will be on a small level, so a local level where the Red Cross sends out a team member right when the disaster is happening. We'll offer services, so we offer health services, spiritual care, mental health, and then they'll ask, would you like to speak to a crisis counselor? And if they say yes, they would like to talk to a clinician, then they put in a referral, and someone from my team will reach out to them. But then we also will, when we had the big floods in January 2023, we opened up a shelter for 18 days. So during that time, I was working with my team and our other regional team members to come and provide support to the shelter.
What does your training look like? You mentioned you kind of go through the training when you first started. You're seeing people on their worst day, their worst week, worst month, and you're sort of there as that support system, it seems, to kind of help them with the the mental, emotional load that goes with any sort of aftershock from a disaster. What kind of training do you go through to prepare for that and make sure that these families are comforted in that time of need and get that mental health support that is really necessary, right? To kind of figure out exactly, unload kind of what has just happened to them.
Yeah, so we have a lot of different training that the Red Cross requires that everyone has to do just to be a volunteer within the Red Cross. And then, so we're learning about shelters and, how it's a well-oiled machine with lots of people doing a part. And, and so you're learning about the whole systems and what we do when we open a shelter or, respond to a disaster. But then there's also specific mental health training that we offer that our volunteers are required to conduct. But then there's also just, there's the what's in the books and, all the videos and the training, but also learning from folks that have been doing this. So I remember the first time I was going out to a shelter in Imperial County, my regional lead, so who kind of I go to for mentorship to support my team, she talked to me the entire drive there, over an hour, just walking me through everything I might encounter in that shelter and what are common things to be looking for and what I need to do. So there is this amazing support that we provide within the Red Cross, within our team. So I have a lot of new people since the LA fires. We did see a high rise in people wanting to join our team. So, their first time doing a call, I'm making sure that I'm available. I'm there for consultation, anything that comes up, walking them through it, checking in, how did they feel afterwards. So we really focus on making sure people feel supported given the trauma work that we, are dealing with.
What happens as far as when you're sent to a disaster? What is sort of the work that it entails? And does it change at all for the different situations that people are dealing with? So what is sort of the work once you meet with someone? What does that work entail, and how long are you with those folks when they do seek help? How long is the process that you end up working with them?
Well, the process is typically short, brief mental health services. We're really trying to get folks through that crisis, through that beginning stage, and then we really want to connect them to their community. We want them to get, maybe they've seen a clinician, a therapist prior. We really want to get them connected to folks that are going to understand their culture, their community, and can provide more of that long-term care. But we're there for that immediate, getting them through that crisis situation. What that looks like really depends on, it's really unique to each disaster. There are themes that we know from my work and with one community working with floods to fires. There's different components that I know will be shifted. So there's hope when, for example, with the floods, that maybe there was things that were salvageable. Maybe there was things that they could clean, whereas others know they've lost everything. Or, for example, what we saw a lot in the LA fires is maybe their home was saved, didn't burn, but they no longer can go back to it because it's in such a restricted area. They were told that their home is still standing, but because it's in a restricted area due to the hazardness, they can't return. So, learning, the Red Cross makes sure right when you deploy, when you go to headquarters, you're learning exactly what's happening. They make you do an intro, sit in on a briefing of what exactly is happening, what they're seeing, what's going on in the shelters versus what's going on, kind of our outreach efforts.
Yeah. And in all your years of doing this, are there any sort of stories, and without getting into specific detail, and obviously a lot of this is confidential with the people you work with, are there any incidents or stories that stand out with you over the time that you've been doing this?
Yes, I would say I was specifically assigned to outreach in the Pacific Palisades during the time when the area was completely restricted, and they were only letting in a handful of residents at a time. They were escorted in by the police to see their home for the very first time, or what was of their home. And during that time, we were allowed in to be able to provide, myself and a colleague, to provide support as folks were seeing what used to be their home or their home for the first time. And I had never seen that level of devastation before. To get to the areas we were going into, we went down some of those roads that you saw on the news of the cars facing backwards on the streets, and seeing it in real life after watching it on the news was a really experience that's very hard to describe, and seeing that level of devastation. Also at that time, there was no, our phones didn't work, there's no power. So within the community that we saw of the first responders, I would say, the piece that really stuck with me was how much the responders took care of one another. While we were out there, multiple people would stop by and say, "Oh, we just got lunch. Do you all need food?" And, we'd stop by to check in on, a fire station, and they'd be offering us, drinks to make sure, we were taking care of ourselves. So I was really touched, and will stay with me, just the level of support that I saw the first responders giving to one another, given what we were witnessing and watching, and having to see these people go back to nothing left of their home except debris.
I mean, doing this work too, and also even if you're not going into disasters, being a mental health family therapist can be a lot. You're hearing a lot, and you also need support as well. What are your recommendations, or how do you get the mental health support you need when you cover devastation or work with families and hear stories? And it can be hard, I'm sure, to kind of process that too. How do you mental health professionals get the support they need, or what are some recommendations you have?
Yeah. One thing that we do at the Red Cross is we really take care of one another, and we know what each other are going through when someone deploys, or when someone's on call, or working with victims. So we do a lot of checking in with one another, and, really, I can call my mentor, my regional lead, any time of the day. My team knows. I stay up late, and my kids wake me up early, so I'm always available. And really, there is, you can call for any reason, and really any emotion, any response to what we're witnessing or hearing the stories is okay. For me, specifically, after the fires, I really gave myself time to really process everything I saw. I'm glad I didn't do it alone. We do go out in pairs. There was lots of tears on that long drive home in traffic. I think it was my own emotions coming out, and after, keeping it together, hearing all the stories, there's a part of you that needs to release it. So I think over the years as a therapist, I've learned how to really let myself feel the emotions I feel, knowing all the stories I'm hearing and the experiences, but also learning to let it out. I also took a little time to, maybe not talk about it right away, and just let my body kind of readjust to coming back to normal life. But then also, I'm very lucky that my closest friends all happen to be therapists or counselors, and then also all my colleagues as well here at USD. So I do feel that I have a lot of people that, can understand or know what that's like, and, can really support me in that. And if anything, I've learned to do these reframes of kind of knowing what to be grateful for and what to appreciate. And also, I would say my clients also help me, move forward. When I talk to someone after they've been through a disaster, the devastation, how upset they are, and then to speak with them a week later and they're in such a better place and they're feeling hopeful again, that really helps me, because then when I work with the next family, I remember maybe in that moment when they're just don't feel that they can go on, or they feel that this is never going to heal, I will remember another client, maybe saying the same thing or feeling that same way. And then I remember, nope, they can do this. They can recover from this. And that really kind of drives me and helps me support the next family, knowing, my success stories of folks that I've, been able to connect with, and they're like, oh, I'm so much better. And, they have hope again. And so I just really kind of bring from one family to the next, to keep that alive.
For anybody that is dealing with a disaster in their life, big or small, or any challenge, Do you have any recommendations for people? I mean, seeing a mental health professional is always a great resource, but any tips for people that are dealing with a hard time in their life and not exactly sure how to get out of it? And it could be big or small.
Yeah. The first thing that pops into my head is how much, even when we don't want to ask for help, reaching out to our community, whatever that looks like. That could be an online space. That could be, maybe reaching out to folks that you haven't talked to. Sometimes we think people don't want to be there for us, and you'll be surprised that people get to feel connected to you when you reach out. I would say that's a theme I've seen working with the Red Cross clients is this, I don't want to bother them, or they don't want to help me. And then, once I kind of say, well, maybe let's give it a shot, they're so surprised how much people do want to show up for them. I think sometimes if maybe your community is not giving you what you need, how do you find purpose in other ways, or how do you find connection in other ways? One way, what I found for myself is really finding purpose, and that can be, for me, it was volunteer work. Sometimes when we can support others in need in a way, it can really heal ourselves. So I think that's, another way. I think also talking about what we're feeling, really, especially when you're going through a grieving process, everyone grieves differently, right? So you and your partner might grieve really differently about something, and both, ways of grieving are really okay, and they're unique, and really accepting that we might see things differently, and really thinking about the ways that we can heal ourselves. And talk to ourselves. So if maybe, a friend has gone through something, thinking about what you said to them, how can you look in the mirror and say that to yourself in those moments when sometimes we have to look within to really get ourselves through the next step. Immediately after a disaster or something hard, I think what I've learned is folks tend to forget to eat and sleep and drink water. And when we don't do those things, we feel our emotions so much stronger. And it makes it really hard to get those tasks done that you need to do after maybe losing all of your personal items and identification, or helping, maybe you're a caregiver. If we forget those things, because we feel we're too busy to eat or too busy to sleep, there's too much to do, we then feel emotions so much stronger, and then it makes every task so much more frustrating or so much more exhausting. And so one of the things I always really recommend is you have to sleep, you have to eat. Those tasks will be there, and your brain will function better, and you'll be able to, really get those things done that you need to help you recover. But first, you have to really fuel yourself and let yourself focus on getting better, so that then you can do all the things that you have to get done.
Yeah, those are really great tips. And thank you so much for sharing your journey with the Red Cross and the work you're doing on the ground. So really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to catch our next one.